Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we will discuss the analysis phase. So just to remind the previous lectures, so we were started software engineering concept. First we discussed the software life cycle. That what is the fundamental concept in software engineering is software life cycle. So we explained the software cycle, and then we discuss the processes involved in software engineering. We talk about the waterfall model, which is a developmental process flow in only one direction. So we explain that how the four phases of software development process done in only one direction, from analysis, design, implementation, and testing. Then we discuss the incremental model, that in which the software is developed in a series of steps. So increment 1, 2, and 3, right? So today we will talk about the analysis phase, the first phase of software development life cycle, which is analysis phase. So the development process start with the analysis phase, and this phase result in specification document that shows what the software do for you, without specifying that how it will be done. So the analysis phase can use two separate approaches, which is depending upon whether the implementation phase is done using a procedural programming language or object oriented language. So we briefly discuss both in this section. So the procedural oriented analysis, also called structural analysis or classical analysis, it is the analysis process used if the system implementation phase will be use procedural oriented languages like Pascal language and C language. This specification in this case may use several modeling tools, but we discuss few of them. The first we discuss data flow diagram, and that data flow diagram shows the movement of data in the system, that how the data will flow in the system. So I explained in the last lecture about the example of hotel reservation system, that how the data flows. So I've explained that in the last lecture. Entity relationship diagram, that it is another modeling tool used. The analysis phase is an entity relationship diagram, since this diagram is also called database design. So in this model, all you need to know that we create different entities in the system, and then with the help of a diagram we find the relationship between these entities. Then we discussed in the last lecture about the state diagram, which provide another useful tool that is normally used when the state of an entity in the system will change in response to event. An example of state diagram, we show the operation of one passenger elevator. So I've explained that in detail in the last lecture, if you remember, that how the state of the system change, and we discussed this example of elevator. So you might have idea about it. Now in object-oriented analysis is the analysis process used when the implementation uses an object-oriented language. So I think we start from here. That was I think we discussed this state diagram of procedural oriented. Now we will talk about object oriented analysis. So the previous state diagram, entity relationship diagram, and data flow diagram were the procedural oriented analysis. Today we will start from object oriented analysis. So in the software development process, when we are developing any project, any software, any system, we start from analysis. So if our implementation language is object oriented language like C++, C Sharp, Java, so these are the object oriented languages which we'll see in all those. So the specification document in this case maybe use several tools, and we discuss a few of them. So when we finish the analysis phase, we will get a specification document, and this specification document showing that what are the requirements of the client. So our whole system will base on that specification document. So the first tool we use is use case diagram. So a use case diagram gives the user view of the system. So what is the user view of the system? It shows how the user communicate with the system. For example, if you create a system, so end of the day, when you deliver that system, that software to any organization, to your client, so they are going to interact with that system, they are going to communicate with that system. So in that use case diagram, we find out that what type of how the client, the end user will communicate with the system. So a use case diagram uses 4 components, which is a more important. Number first, they use a use cases, overall system, then use cases, actor, and relationship. So system become a whole entity. Within the system we use cases, number 2, number 3 actor, number 4 relationship. So a system shown by a rectangle performs a function. For example, if we go back to this elevator state diagram, so we discussed that use case diagram for that example again. So elevator, the lift which we use in a tall building, and we use for moving up and down in the lift in that building. So now you can see that user is interacting with the elevator using 2 buttons. The user is pressing a button for elevator button, means to open the elevator for you, and which closes the elevator for you. So this is the user is interacted with the elevator. For example, the elevator is run by a computer, so that system is using by a user. So how the user will interact. So if you want to open, so you will press the elevator button, it will open for you. Then you go inside, then you press the elevator button which close the door, and then you press a floor button. You want to go to first floor, third floor, fifth floor, basement, which floor you want to go, you need to press that button and the elevator will take you there. So this diagram shows that these are the 2 options, the 2 cases, use cases where the user is interacting with the system. So the use case diagram. So in short, the use case diagram tells you how the user communicate or interact with the system, right? Another important tool we use in object-oriented analysis is a class diagram. It's a very important, and you need to understand this concept. If the class diagram concept is cleared, then you can work on any project and you can create a good project. So in the analysis phase, in this analysis phase, the next step is to create a class diagram for a system. For example, if you can create a class diagram for old style elevator, the example which we discuss here in the use case diagram and in the state diagram, so here we are using for class diagram, right? To do so, we need to think about the entities involved in the system. So if you think about the elevator, so you are dealing with 4 entities. Number first, button, elevator by itself, floor button, and elevator button, So if you think about elevator, so what does the elevator for you? The elevator is doing uh, helping you to take from one floor to another floor. So overall we consider elevator as an entity, then that entity and button is also the floor button and the elevator button. So these are the four entities we discuss, right? So now you can say that elevator has a floor button. So if you can see the relation one to many, one to many, elevator has floor button. So elevator must have, because if the elevator is installing in any building, it means that it got so many floors. So the elevator has more than one floor buttons. And also the elevator has an elevator buttons which is more than one to many relation. For example, the elevator have open button, the elevator have close button, the door opening and closing, and might be if you are introducing emergency stop or calling emergency button, so you can create how many buttons you want. And now these two buttons, floor buttons and elevator buttons, have a common superclass which we call a button. So in this class diagram we create a class which has two subclasses, elevator button and floor button, and this two floor button is owned by an elevator. So this class diagram, when you have this class diagram and you want to write a code for this elevator software, so you can easily write a code. You can create a class name button, and then this class have two subclasses, elevator button and floor button, and this elevator have relation with elevator and another class which is named elevator, which is a overall a class representing an elevator. So this elevator has a relation with the floor button, and also this elevator has a relation with the elevator button, right? So this is the basic concept of class diagram. And I would suggest that if you start working on creating a class diagram for a small project, for a small system, for a small project or software which contains only 3 or 4 classes, and just create the relationship between the classes, right? So I think you do practice, you will learn to know. So another tool which we use in object-oriented analysis is a state chart. After the class diagram is finalized, a state chart can be prepared for each class in the class diagram. And a state chart in object-oriented analysis plays the same role as the state diagram in procedural-oriented programming. This means that for class diagram of figure 10.7, we need to have 4 state chart. So for example, if you look into the above this diagram, so in state chart, we need to create a 4 state chart for each class. So we need to prepare a state chart for each class. And for example, if you see the state diagram here in procedural oriented languages, so this is, we call it a state diagram, but in object oriented analysis we need a state chart. So we create a chart for each class, and that will tell that how the class depend on another class. So basically, if you see this relation, floor button, elevator button is subclasses of button. So when you create these charts, so these relation can be depicted in state chart, right? So I think it's enough for today. You need to practice on object-oriented analysis. Study different example of use case diagrams, class diagrams, state chart, and the best idea is you can Google different state use case diagrams of different software. First, think about think about of a software, like for example here you know about the elevator, how it works, and now I'm explaining this use case diagram. So when you open the use case, if you just write that use case diagram of different software, use case diagram examples, so you can study different examples, so you can get clear idea and understand how the what is actually use case diagram. Similarly, the class diagram, find some couple of example on the internet and try to understand, and then create your own idea. For example, if you have an idea in mind and you are creating a system for any organization, so or any small level project, so you create a class diagram, so it will be helpful. And also find some example of state chart diagram as well. Okay, it's enough for today. And this lecture link is available on the Google Classroom, as well as it's available on my YouTube channel as well, right? So whenever you want, you can visit my YouTube channel and watch the lecture. Okay, thank you so much.